Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Access Blockbusters Pod, episode number 60. I don't know, it's irrational of me to think that, but the round numbers, every 10, it feels important, even though it's another episode and we want to deliver the same kind of quality and entertainment, hopefully, as we do every single episode. So, guys, welcome back to the Access Blockbusters Pod. It was quite an interesting week, and we have a lot to discuss, especially coming out of the Golden Globes. I mean, we're going to talk about, what the Golden Globes wins actually mean for the upcoming Oscar race, but also a lot of people on the red carpets doing interviews, Matt Reeves and KATHRYN HAHN'S, so lots to discuss there. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the horrific tragedies that are going on in the LA area, in the SoCal area, and I usually don't, talk about real, quote unquote, real world things. I mean, things outside of movies and TV. I feel like, even though this is more adjacent to movies and TV because of productions being shut down, things like that, but that's really not the point. I just wanted to say, our thoughts and prayers are with everybody being affected by it, and it's just crazy. It's so sad seeing all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, whatever we can do to help out, it's crazy what's going on there. So anyways, I wanted to bring that up because I've been seeing a lot going on about that, and it, again, I don't like to talk about other things outside of movies and TVs, but because this was somewhat tangentially related, I thought I'd bring it up here. So anyways, that is, that's what I wanted to say. But anyways, getting back to the podcast, if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, if that's where you're listening, then make sure to do so. And guys, exciting announcement. I kind of snuck it in to the descriptions of the previous episode's podcast, but we now are on Apple Podcasts. So I'm working to get the podcast onto all the other platforms, but I have it now. We've been on Spotify for a while, but all the podcast episodes are now available on Apple Podcasts. If that is your preferred listening medium of choice, then it's going to be right there. I'm going to work on Overcast and trying to get it on all the other major platforms. And if you guys like to listen to podcasts on any other platforms, leave a comment down below and I'll try to get it up there as well. So that is that, guys. It's going to be an exciting coming, a couple weeks coming up. We got the end of Skeleton Crew next week, which sucks, and Severance is starting up, season 2. So a lot of exciting stuff, and hopefully, still getting caught up on the Oscar movies. But that is all I wanted to say there. Make sure to subscribe, give the video a like. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, give it a rating. And without further ado, let's get into the topics. All right, guys, so while there is the news of the Golden Globes themselves, and we will certainly talk about them and what the Golden Globes nominations and wins mean and what they imply for the Oscars going forward, but there are also a lot of auxiliary stories that came out of the Golden Globes as well. And one of them, we'll talk about Colin Farrell coming up, and we'll talk about, again, the Golden Globes themselves, but one of them is KATHRYN HAHN. KATHRYN HAHN, who was nominated, I believe, in the Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy Series for her role as Agatha Harkness in Agatha All Along, which, I enjoyed the series for what it was. I think she was on a red carpet interview, and they asked her, they said, what do you think about doing Agatha season 2? Is it going to happen? And she gave some quotes here that, look, it's that kind of gray area where could it mean nothing at all? Sure. It could absolutely mean nothing at all. However, could this be hinting at something? Maybe. And so I wanted to read these quotes out loud here, and then we can talk about whether or not it means anything. Again, could mean nothing. Could mean nothing at all. But, I think it's fun to read these comments and see what she has to say. So, KATHRYN HAHN on the red carpet, and here's an article that has all the quotes. So here's the first one. She says, quote, "Am I personally done with playing this witch? No," she says. That's the first quote, okay? Pretty straightforward. However, it's worth pointing out that she's not the one in control of whether or not she gets to play Agatha again. There is also the matter of the ending of season 1 of Agatha All Along, if it is season 1, the ending of season 1 of Agatha All Along being pretty open-ended. So there is that. So if she's not done playing the character and if Kevin Feige wants her back, then sure, she can come back. So that's the first quote. Second quote here is in response to a question, one that we ourselves have asked on this channel, actually, and it's talking about the fact that Agatha All Along was submitted not in the limited series category, which limited series would indicate that Agatha All Along was a one and done kind of a show, just one season was planned and nothing else, but instead it was submitted in the comedy series, which I think the stipulations of the Golden Globe rules are that if you are to be submitted in that category, it suggests that you are or planning on or have ideas, or I don't know the exact rules, but there is some notion that there is going to be another season of the show. Very interesting. In fairness, though, to my knowledge, if you're submitted in the limited series, I don't think that precludes you from, at a later point, greenlighting a season 2. If you know the answer to that, let me know in the comments below, because that's from my understanding. But either way, it's still interesting that Marvel would submit the show in the comedy series. And so the reporter asks KATHRYN HAHN about that, and this is what she says. Quote, "It does suggest that. Han conceded when, asked about the fact that it suggests that there's going to be season 2. Quote, "I am as in the dark as you are. There's going to be a Vision show, so that could be of a trilogy with Agatha all along WandaVision is what she's referring to. Quote, but who knows?" Okay, so look. So first of all, let's address the first quote here. Am I done playing the Switch? No. So obviously, like I said, does that mean anything necessarily? No, because if Kevin Feige was like, yeah, we had a great run with Agatha all along and we're just going to shut it down, KATHRYN HAHN herself has no real say in that. And that's totally fine. It's just how the movie industry works. However, there are a lot of contributing factors going to this being a very positive sign, because it seems like if you were Kevin Feige and if you were in his position, all signs point to the fact that yes, absolutely, of all the shows that you have going on, and Daredevil Born Again, to be fair, first season hasn't even released yet. It's coming out in 2 months, by the way, which is crazy. I'm super excited for that. But, of all the shows that are coming out, right, you would greenlight a season 2 of Agatha all along for a couple of reasons. Number one, it did critically pretty well. It's one of the shows that the critics were like, hey, it's pretty good, right? And look, for the MCU, that's unfortunately a pretty low bar to clear, but it is a bar nonetheless. You have shows like Echo and Secret Invasion recently, and even other shows like Falcon and Winter Soldier, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel, She-Hulk. Not since WandaVision has there been a show where you had, universal acclaim, and Agatha all along wasn't nearly the kind of acclaim that WandaVision had, but still, it was a very positively received show. On top of that, number 2 is that the viewership numbers steadily increased every single episode. If those two things are not the recipe to greenlight a season 2, especially because the end of season 1 was fairly open-ended, in fact, I would argue frustratingly so open-ended, because the ending was just kind of like, hey, let's go on another adventure to find Tommy. Fine, whatever. But, I would argue that Kevin Feige would be kind of silly not to greenlight a season 2. And I'm not talking about Kevin Feige himself, but just any executive would be kind of silly to not greenlight a season 2 and see if they couldn't capitalize on that positive momentum. So I think KATHRYN HAHN being game to come back is definitely a good thing. Now, to the second quote there, is the fact that, KATHRYN HAHN is mentioning on red carpets the Vision show and the fact that she knows about it. Does that mean she has a little cameo in the Vision show or anything like that? Not necessarily, right? I don't think that this is, we should all be jumping up and down saying Ghost Agatha's gonna be in Vision, and Vision's gonna secretly be about, nothing about Vision. It's gonna be about finding Tommy instead. I don't necessarily think that's what's going on here. Now, does that preclude her from showing up in the Vision show? No, not at all. I think that I'd give it at this point maybe a 15% chance. I don't think that that's out of the question at all. But I don't think that, what she says here, and what she says is interesting, right? It's not just the fact that she's like, oh, there is a Vision show. She is almost directly paraphrasing or directly quoting that Hollywood Reporter article, I believe, that said something like, yeah, WandaVision, Agatha All Along, and Vision were intended to be a kind of trilogy. So whether or not, she saw that article and was like, oh, what a cool idea. Whether or not that is something internally that Jack Schaefer was talking about, that Kevin Feige had told KATHRYN HAHN, maybe Kevin Feige was just like, hey, really good of you to be a part of the second part of this trilogy of shows that we're doing. And then that was it. Maybe, right? But the fact that she is in the know somewhat about this Vision show is definitely a good thing. So again, I think here, do these two quotes mean that a season 2 is definitely coming? No, not at all. Would I be on the side of, if you're going to do the coin flip, 50-50 or whatever, like, would I be on the side of yes or no, show is coming, second season is coming, second season is not coming? I would definitely be on the side of a second season is coming. Because again, if you're just looking at this, the signs are just building on top of one another. No single sign in isolation is enough to say a second season is coming, but all of them starting to stack on top of each other. KATHRYN HAHN being like, well, I want to come back, and KATHRYN HAHN being like, yeah, there is the Vision show, and maybe, could be a part of that. And then, obviously all the signs of the viewership. And also, I should just mention, we should have mentioned this at the very top, the fact that KATHRYN HAHN is at the Golden Globes because she was nominated for a Golden Globe for Agatha Harkness. And again, it's not necessarily like, oh, you get nominated for, whatever, and you get to be, you get to have a second season, or you get to have a sequel automatically. That's not necessarily what happens. Like, a bunch of Marvel movies are nominated for, just as an example, I know that visual effects and acting categories are not equivalent at all in terms of, just sort of status or whatever. But, I mean, Marvel films are nominated for visual effects all the time, right? So it's not a guarantee that you get sequels and whatnot. But it is definitely a good sign. So I would think that, again, we are still getting more and more signs that an Agatha All Along season 2 is coming. But I want to ask you guys, do you think an Agatha All Along season 2 is coming? Or do you think that this is all just kind of her being like, yeah, I'd love to come back, but we'll see. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, speaking of exciting comic book properties, the Batman Part 2, which we just talked about in the last week's episode of the Access Blockbusters pod, that the Batman Part 2 was going to be delayed from 2026 October to 2027 October, which is very disappointing. So again, the reason that was given for that was because James Gunn was like, yeah, the script isn't done, and we just wanted to be safe rather than sorry. And questions began to arise of, oh, is Matt Reeves just, I don't know, is he stalling, or what's going on? Are there problems with the script? So then we got an update about, Batman Part 2 from Matt Reeves himself, which is always exciting. Now, again, you want to take these things with a grain of salt, because perhaps Matt Reeves is trying to cover, or Matt Reeves, is just trying to say, no, nothing to worry about, when in fact there is stuff to worry about. But the quotes that he gave are very specific and very, frankly, exciting, although I'll talk about one interesting thing about this whole thing later on. But, I think it's interesting to hear what he has to say, because, I think that there's a lot to unpack here. So we're going to read some quotes, as we like to do, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. So I believe this was also at the Golden Globes. I could be wrong about this, but he was there for the Penguin, and he gave some quotes about the Penguin. First, he said, quote, "There's been a lot of stuff going on in my life in the last year or so, and he's been such a good friend. He's such a beautiful man." So that's really nice. He's praising Colin Farrell. And then he gives another quote here about the Batman Part 2. And so he says, quote, "I can tell you that we're going to be shooting this year and that we're excited about it. Can't really tell you anything about it except that we're really excited. We're continuing the story. I'm really excited to be making it, to get our cast back together, to get new people involved, and we're really excited about it." He said excited like 5 times in there. Just reading the direct quotes here. And he says it once again, because this is the next quote here. Quote, "What I'm excited about is I feel like we're doing something that absolutely continues where the story came from, but it's something that I hope people are going to be really surprised by." Okay, interesting. Then in a separate interview, he was asked directly why the Batman 2 had been delayed, and he said, quote, "Because we're still finishing the script, and there have been so many things going on. The next year is about getting into production and getting the movie going." So that is about as direct of an update here from Matt Reeves that you could ever get. And I think there's a couple interesting things to break down here. Number one, he says there have been delays because of just some personal things going on in his life. Totally fair. Totally fair. Because again, it's not like other films, for example, where you just have the writers writing the film and then you have the director kind of off to the side and the director kind of comes in collaboratively and then they all kind of work together to make the film. I think Matt Reeves is very much the guy who's spearheading the entire endeavor, right? And so I think that if there were, genuinely things going on in his life, and we don't know, and it's not our business to really know if there were really serious things going on, then yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It makes total sense. Now, it is exciting then to hear about the fact that the Batman Part 2 is coming, because they are going to be filming very soon. And it sounds like, and he gave some quotes a couple months ago, I believe, talking about, yeah, the script isn't finished, but we're getting there, and he teased the story. So it really does seem like the script is almost there, which I think is really exciting. So if what he says is true, that the Batman Part 2 is filming in sometime in 2025, then I think that we are, I think there's a little bit less to worry about than we had initially thought. Now, the interesting thing about all of that, though, is that, and also, by the way, I should have mentioned, just as a quick aside, he did give some quotes at a different point, and I don't have them pulled up with me, but he did give some quotes at a separate interview that it was like, yeah, we're looking into how the Penguin season 2 could fit into that. And we've talked about how a potential Penguin season 2 would probably come about. And this was before Colin Farrell's historic win that we'll talk about in just a little bit. But anyways, he said that they're also working on how the Penguin Part 2 might fit, or the Penguin season 2 might fit into this whole universe. But getting back to the Batman Part 2, I think that it's exciting that, he's like, yeah, we're gonna make something really cool, and that, I hope everyone is surprised by it, which I think is interesting. What would we possibly be surprised by? I don't know. I think we were all pleasantly surprised by his first film, so I'm pretty excited to hear about what we might be seeing in the next one. Now, interestingly though, let's be generous, right? Let's just say, the script is not done. Let's just say it takes the majority of the year for the script to be finished. And let's say that they get cameras rolling November 2025. Okay. Then let's assume that this is a longer shoot, because usually shoots for even big movies take maybe about 4 months. I'd say 3 to 4 months. So let's just be generous and say this takes 5 months, because it's a big shoot and there are a lot of actors and whatnot. Okay, takes 5 months. And then let's just say this is a very, very extensive post-production. I'm not necessarily saying that they would have been able to make their original October 2025 release or 2026 release date anyways. I'm not saying that, because understanding that there's a lot that goes into these movies. It takes years of pre-production, post-production, etc., etc. So who knows? But if they're going to be filming sometime this year, and again, that's not a promise, that's just Matt Reeves saying we're planning on filming this year. So who knows, right? They might film next year, whatever. But it seems like they're going to be filming at some point starting this year. And that means that, honestly, I'm a little confused as to why they moved the Batman Part 2 all the way back to 2027, because then they have I feel like they would have at least 6 months, if not a year, just to sit on the film, which is, I don't know, it's a bit disappointing to me, don't you think? Unless they're going to be filming the Batman Part 2 and Part 3 back to back, and this was a whole secret that hadn't gotten revealed, which would make some more sense in my opinion, because then you just release, Part 2 in 2027, Part 2 or Part 3 in 2028. I don't know if that's the case, but it's, it's very interesting to me, because I'm trying to rack my brains about, okay, what is the most generous timeline I could give Matt Reeves given his comments, right? Because again, delays could happen, but given what he said, what is the most generous timeline that we could give him? And I think that it still seems like the film could come out in late 2026 anyways. The other thing to note though, and it's not often that this happens, it's not common, because I think movie studios don't want to give that kind of whiplash to, distributors, and there's I think there's some money involved in this as well. But there are always scenarios in which films get moved up as well. So there's no guarantee that the film still will come out in October 2027 if they're tracking really well. For all we know, right? They could go right back to the October 2026 release date if everything is tracking super well, which I would suspect is not super realistic, even if, we give a generous timeline. But let's just say, because the Batman Part 1 came out in March of 2022, I believe. So let's just say that everything's going well, and the Batman Part 2 comes out in March of 2027 instead of October. That's a huge difference. That's 6 months difference, right? So again, I think that there's some nuance here, right? Because I think, sure, October 2027 is really far away, but I suspect if this Matt Reeves timeline is to be believed, that we won't have to wait quite that long. But I ask you guys, when do you think the Batman Part 2, based on Matt Reeves' comments, is actually going to come out? And are you excited for the fact that it's going to be filming this year? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, The Last of Us was a show that I just frankly wasn't expecting to like as much as I did. It got all of the acclaim, and people were saying it's one of the greatest shows ever made, but I just, for whatever reason, maybe it was the survivalist kind of aspect to it, the zombie apocalypse sort of vibes, which I generally don't gravitate to, or just the fact that I hadn't played the games and wasn't super familiar with it. But I didn't have much expectation going into the first season of The Last of Us, and I really liked the first season. It was really well written, great acting, great character work, and from what I've heard, because I've listened to some reviews and heard people who have played the games talk about it, they made some adaptations from the games. And I think that actually what people were saying is that the adaptations that they made were quite good. So heading into the second season of The Last of Us, which of course they were going to make because there is a second game, I was intrigued. And I haven't looked up the plot of the second game, which I hear has some things in there that have upset some people, some fans of the games. I don't know what they're talking about at all, and I'm going to try to avoid it, for as much as I can. Because before we get into the trailer, only 4 months away, or I guess 3 months away at this point, because The Last of Us Season 2 announced in their latest trailer that they are coming out, the second season is coming out in April. So we have a concrete release window, not a release date yet, I don't think, but we have a release window. It's coming out in just 3 months. So I'm sure we're going to get a more story-focused trailer in a couple months, but we have a little bit of a teaser. I think we also got a teaser a couple months ago as well, so this is a second teaser of sorts. And so, yeah, Last of Us Season 2, just a couple months to avoid some major spoilers from the game, and then we'll be on our way. Although I did hear that this second season is going to be an adaptation of the first half of the second game. So, there's going to be more, because there will be a Last of Us Season 3, is what I hear. So, anyways, let's talk about the trailer itself. It's really not a whole lot to talk about. I heard, Last of Us Season 2 trailer coming out, and I was like, okay, great. I went on and went on YouTube, clicked on it, watched it, and I was like, oh, okay. That's it. For the vibes and for what it was going for, because it was just purely going for vibes, and it was just going for a tone, and the tone was desperation, honestly, anger and desperation. And we get our first glimpses, I think, of Abby, one of the characters that I know almost nothing about, but I know is going to be one of the more pivotal characters that is introduced in season 2, played by Caitlin Dever, who I think she was in Booksmart, right? And she was really good in Booksmart, so that's what I remember her from. But I'm excited about the season. We get some shots of her to start out with. We get, I think, a couple shots of Bella Ramsey, who plays Ellie. And then we have Joel, obviously, but really not a whole lot else to go off of here. So yeah, again, just wanted to bring it up because I really enjoyed the first season of The Last of Us, and the second trailer, or excuse me, the trailer for the second season looks, about the same. It's giving off all the good signs of the first season, and personally, I think that's all good. So we'll wait for a longer trailer to come out in a couple months, I'm sure. And honestly, for me, as somebody who doesn't want to know much about what happens in the second season based on the games, and even if I knew everything, then I'm sure they're going to make some adaptations based on the fact that they're splitting it up into 2 seasons. I'm just excited to see the show at this point, and I'm just, kind of in that waiting mode of I don't really need to see any more marketing. But we'll talk about another major trailer if that comes out. So have you seen, first of all, the release date? April 2025 for The Last of Us Season 2. Have you seen the release date, and are you excited that it's coming, I think, much sooner than I had thought? That's coming out in April. Also, Andor Season 2 is coming out in April, so it's going to be a really good month for Disney Plus and for Max, both releasing some premium shows, premium content out there. So are you excited that it's coming sooner than you thought? And what did you guys think of the trailer? Personally, I really liked the trailer. It really didn't show a whole lot, but I think, personally, that's okay. So let me know what you thought about the trailer, and if you're really excited for Season 2, just like I am, let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, let's talk about the results of the Golden Globes 2025. So I'm going to be honest, I usually don't pay attention to the results of the Golden Globes too much. I'm more of an Oscars guy myself, but I think that now, especially with the channel and especially with doing the weekly podcasts, I think it's very interesting to at least pay attention to the results and see what we might be able to glean from the results of the Golden Globes. And I'm looking at this in a way of saying, does this tell us anything about who might win the Oscars? Does this give us a lens into what the results of the Academy Awards might be? And I think there are some interesting insights in here that I think we can talk about. But, I want to go through some of the categories. In fact, I have an article pulled up here where I have, I believe, all the major categories and their winners. So we'll go through as many as I think is interesting to talk about here. We'll skim through some others. But again, I think that it's a very interesting exercise in thinking about, okay, do the results of the Golden Globe, can they forecast anything about the Oscars? Now, I was doing a little bit of research beforehand, and the interesting thing is that there is usually a decent bit of overlap between the Golden Globes, Best Picture winners, Best Actor winners, etc., and the Oscars. That being said, it's not even close to 100% match rate, right? I think that, I think one of the recent examples was Coda, for example. I don't think Coda won at the Golden Globes, which I think it ended up winning the Best Picture. That year I think was a little weird, a little strange. To be fair, I think that was the COVID year. But anyways, I think that, it's important to keep in mind that it doesn't always line up. So just because something some actress or actor won a category doesn't necessarily mean that they're a lock to win at the Oscars, if that makes sense. So we're going to go through this. And also in fairness, because I want to do a couple at least, Oscar preview segments and even maybe a couple Oscar preview episodes, right? Where I make my own predictions and put them out there for you guys to react to and, hopefully get some of them right. But I think that, I still need to work my way through a lot of the Oscar nominated films, or at least the predicted Oscar nominated films, because I think that the results of the nominations are coming out next week. So we'll talk about them hopefully in next week's episode, I think, is when they will come out. But that being said, I still admittedly have to work my way through a lot of them. Let me just tell you right now, actually, as of the recording of this segment, which films I have seen, and then which films I am still, trying to see before the Oscar nominations come out. So just so that I can give you a more robust idea of, more robust predictions, more robust analysis. This is the first year where I'm really attempting before the Oscars come out to watch all of these films. Usually I wait until after the Oscars are done to then sort of go back and see which films I want to watch after it's all finished. But this year, because of, just wanting to cover it more comprehensively, I wanted to go through them beforehand. So here's a list. I have a list here of Oscar films, and you can let me know if I've forgotten some of them, and which ones I should add to this list and which ones you think maybe aren't, part of this list. I'm looking at films that will likely, most importantly, be likely nominated for Best Picture, but also films that probably will win some acting categories as well, even if the films themselves are not nominated. So I have seen, and I'm just going in alphabetical order of this list. First up is Anora. I have seen Anora, and we'll talk more extensively about my thoughts about any of these films later on. The Brutalist I have not seen. A Complete Unknown I have not seen, though I am planning on seeing it hopefully soon. That's the Timothée Chalamet, Bob Dylan biopic. Conclave, as you guys probably know, based on my rankings of my top favorite films of 2024, I have seen Conclave. A Different Man starring Sebastian Stan, I have not seen. Dune Part 2, obviously, I've seen. Emilia Perez, I am actually in the middle of watching. I've seen maybe a third of it so far on Netflix, and we'll talk about that again, at a later point. Gladiator 2, I put Gladiator 2 here because it popped up on a couple Oscar lists. Frankly, I would be a little surprised if it was nominated for Best Picture, but it's on some lists, so I have seen Gladiator 2. Nosferatu, again, popped up on a couple lists. I don't know if it'll be there. Maybe. It's in theaters right now. I don't have any interest, honestly, in seeing it in theaters. I might wait until it comes out. If it does come out before, on streaming or whatever, if it comes out before the Oscars actually happen, I don't know. We'll have to see about that. Frankly, I'm not a huge horror fan, so I don't have a huge desire to see horror films in theaters, but again, that's just me. A Real Pain I actually have seen, and that's the one with Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin, who Kieran Culkin was a winner at the Golden Globes yesterday. Sing Sing I have not seen, and The Substance I have not seen, and then Wicked I obviously have seen. Other websites have put out stuff like the Wild Robot as potential Oscar Best Picture nominations. I don't necessarily know. This list feels pretty comprehensive to me, but again, you can let me know if I've missed a couple of them just based on my research. So let's go through the winners of the Golden Globes and see what we can find. First of all, Best Picture or Best Performance by an actress in a supporting role in any motion picture. Zoe Saldana wins for Emilia Perez. Selena Gomez also nominated for Emilia Perez, and Ariana Grande was another notable actress who was nominated there for Wicked as Glinda. So that's interesting. Best Performance by an Actress in a Television Series, Musical, or Comedy. Jean Smart won for Hacks. I don't think there's, a whole... KATHRYN HAHN was nominated in that category. I guess that's something of note. Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role in any motion picture. That is Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain. So there you go. That's the one Kieran Culkin won. Interestingly, and I guess we'll bring this up now. Anora, right? Anora was a film that was sort of crowned by many as the Oscar favorite heading into the season. And so I was expecting going into yesterday, oh yeah, Anora is probably going to win a bunch of awards. Anora didn't win anything, I don't think. It didn't win any of the major ones at the very least. And so Yura Borisov was nominated for Anora and he didn't win. And Kieran Culkin was the one who got that one. So interesting there. And I think that's going to be a common theme that we see here is that, well, I thought Anora was going to do really well at the Golden Globes and then lead into an Oscar push. I'm not so sure about Anora now in the Oscar race, but we'll have to see about that. Best Performance by an Actor in a Television Series, Drama, that's Hiroyuki Sanada for Shogun. Shogun just won huge. Shogun won big time. Best Performance by an Actress in a Supporting Role in a Television Series, that is Jessica Gunning as in Baby Reindeer. Moving on quickly. The television ones I'm not as familiar with because I haven't seen a lot of these shows. So yeah, there's that. Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role in a Television Series. And this one goes to Tadanobu Asano for Shogun. But guys, Harrison Ford was nominated here for Shrinking. And I talked about this in the last episode, but guys, please watch Shrinking. Please watch Shrinking. This is the best that Harrison Ford has ever been, in my opinion. I'm baffled, honestly, that Shrinking Season 2 didn't get nominated more than this. Because I'm just really baffled, honestly. It's crazy to me. Anyways, all that being said. Best Performance by an Actor in a Television Series, Musical, or Comedy, Jeremy Allen White, our new Rhoda the Hutt, as we talked about before, for The Bear. That's not a big surprise, I don't think. Best Screenplay Motion Picture goes to Conclave, which is great. I think the Conclave script was great. It was awesome. Anora, again, getting shut out. Emilia Perez also getting shut out. Real Pain, pretty good script as well. Jesse Eisenberg getting shut out. And The Substance also. Substance and The Brutal. So these are, I feel like this category in general is a pretty good hint as to what the final Best Picture list is going to look like, plus a couple. Like here, right? It's Conclave, Emilia Perez, Anora, The Brutalist, A Real Pain, The Substance, and then I would add on Dune Part 2 and Wicked, and maybe a couple more like Sing Sing, for example. So I think this is a pretty good idea of what you're going to get here at the Oscars. Stand-up, I'm not really going to... Ali Wong won stand-up, but again, I'm not too familiar with any of these. Best Motion Picture Non-English is Emilia Perez. It's that classic, if a film wins Best Picture and it's a foreign film, then obviously it's going to win the foreign film category. This is the one, Colin Farrell, Best Performance by an Actor in a Limited Series, Anthology, Series, or Motion Picture made for television. That is Colin Farrell as Oz Cobb, as Penguin. Amazing work, just fantastic. We talked about this ad nauseum on the channel, so there is that. Best performance by an actress, same category. Jodie Foster, True Detective, Night Country. Really, that's good for her. I've heard a lot of great things about that series, and so really, really happy for her. Kristen Milioti also nominated here for The Penguin, and she didn't win. I think she did a fantastic job, but I've heard also rave things about Jodie Foster in True Detective, Night Country as well. Best performance by an actress in a motion picture, musical, or comedy. This one was a big one. It was Demi Moore for The Substance, which is great. That's awesome. I think, her speech was really moving, and the fact that this was her big, her big moment, and she really found her career revived, and people were calling her a popcorn actress before this, but she really came through here, which is awesome. Also, Cynthia Erivo nominated for Wicked here, but obviously did not win that one. Mikey Madison, Zendaya. Mikey Madison, again, everyone was like, Honora is going to win everything. Mikey Madison nominated here, did not win. And I think that is an interesting thing heading into the Oscars. Best performance by an actor in a motion picture, musical, or comedy. Sebastian Stan for A Different Man. Again, haven't seen that film yet, but, excited to. Jesse Eisenberg also nominated here. Hugh Grant for Heretic. Very interesting. Very, very interesting there. And then, Best Motion Picture Animated goes to a movie called Flow, which honestly, I'm not even going to lie, I haven't heard of this movie before. Inside Out 2, Moana 2, Wild Robot, Wallace and Gromit, interestingly, and Memoir of a Snail. All films I have heard of, and most 3 of them I have seen. But Flow? Never heard of it before. So interesting, because I had assumed it was going to be a race between Wild Robot and Inside Out 2. And personally, I think Inside Out 2 is better. That's just my opinion. But I think that everyone was kind of thinking Wild Robot was going to take it. But Flow, very interesting that another film has won that award. Best Director Motion Picture is the director Brady Corbett for The Brutalist, and again, same kind of deal, right? The Brutalist, Emilia Perez, Honora, Conclave, The Substance, and another film, All We Imagine as Light, is nominated here, the director of that. But again, I don't imagine that that's going to be nominated for Best Picture for the Academy Awards. We'll see. Best Original Score actually went to Challengers, and again, same kind of films, same kinds of films here. Conclave, Brutalist, Wild Robot, Emilia Perez, Dune Part 2. Hans Zimmer, by the way, getting his due for that one. Best Original Song came from Emilia Perez. For those of you who don't know, Emilia Perez is kind of a musical as well. So, there is that. And then, let's moving on here. This category, I didn't even know it existed. Cinematic and Box Office Achievement. I mean, great. I'm happy Wicked won. But, Wicked winning cinematic and box office achievement at the Golden Globes and winning nothing else feels lame. This category just feels lame. Wicked, Alien Romulus, Beetlejuice, Deadpool and Wolverine, Gladiator 2, Inside Out 2, Twisters, The Wild Robot. It just feels like, hey guys, we know that you want to see your big films up here. You wanted to see Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman maybe accept an award, so here you go. And it's like, okay, all right, calm down. So I think that's a little bit odd. I don't love this category having being there, and Wicked that's the only win that Wicked wins. Sure, Wicked is technically a Golden Globe winning film, but it won the Cinematic and Box Office Achievement Award. I think that's kind of silly. But anyways, Best Television Limited Series Anthology or Motion Picture Made for Television is Baby Reindeer, beating out The Penguin, by the way. Best Television Series Comedy or Musical is Hacks. And again, I haven't seen any of these new seasons of television. Hacks, Abbott Elementary, The Bear, The Gentleman, Nobody Wants This, Only Murders in the Building. But guys, shrinking. We're shrinking. Anyways, that's just my own personal vendetta, because I'm sure if I see all of these seasons of television, I'm going to be like, oh, they're all amazing and they all deserve it. But Shrinking is literally one of the best shows I've ever seen. So kind of baffled about that, but whatever. Best Performance by an Actress in a Television Series. It goes to Shogun. No surprise there. The actress's name is Anna Sawai. So she wins for Shogun. And then we move on to Best Television Series Drama. Shogun wins. No big surprise there. Squid Game also nominated, actually, which is kind of interesting because it just released a couple weeks ago. So I don't know what the deadlines are, but it has to be season 2. It can't be season 1. So very interesting there. Best Performance by an Actress in a Motion Picture Drama. That is for... What am I going to mispronounce this? Fernanda Torres for I'm Still Here. Again, not a lot of familiarity here with people in this category. Best Performance by an Actor in a Motion Picture Drama. Adrian Brody, The Brutalist, another a big win for The Brutalist, which I think it's an interesting sign heading into the Oscar season. Best Motion Picture Drama. Speaking of The Brutalist beats out a complete unknown Conclave, Dune Part 2, Nickel Boys, and September 5. September 5 is another film that I think we might be looking out for in terms of filling out those 10 spots for the Oscars, but we'll see about that. But The Brutalist winning Best Motion Picture Drama is very interesting here. And in the category that Honora is in, Best Motion Picture Musical or Comedy is Emilia Perez instead of Honora. So I think that's it. That is it. And it beats out Wicked as well, which I don't think Wicked has a shot to win Best Picture, even if it's nominated, which I think it will be nominated. But again, I think here are a couple takeaways here. And I know I went through that really fast. But I think that here are a couple takeaways that I have from all of that. Number one, like I've been saying throughout this segment, Anora was crowned the presumptive Oscar frontrunner, and it won nothing. And again, I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. I will talk more extensively about my thoughts about Anora and all the other films, Emilia Perez, Real Pain, hopefully watch The Substance, The Brutal, like all these films. I'll talk more extensively about my thoughts on them as we do an Oscar preview in probably a month or so. But, in general, it was interesting to hear all the narratives going into it, and then suddenly the narrative shifts. Now, again, like I said before, they don't always line up 1-to-1, right? Just because Anora doesn't win here doesn't mean that Anora is not going to win at the Oscars. But I think it's more about trends, honestly. And, by winning nothing, because again, if Anora won everything except for maybe Best Actress or something like that, you could make an argument like, oh, but the momentum is on its side. But I think by winning nothing, it kind of is interesting because it flips my perceptions now about who might be the favorites. And I think there are two clear quote unquote winners. I mean, other than objectively winning Golden Globes, but, winners in terms of momentum heading into the Oscar season. And those two films are The Brutalist and Emilia Perez. Now, I haven't seen The Brutalist all the way. I have seen some of Emilia Perez. But, in terms of why those two films have the appeal that they do compared to other films like Anora or A Real Pain or The Substance or whatnot, I don't know. It remains to be seen. But I think that we can probably take that as a lesson to say, I think those two films suddenly gained a lot of momentum heading into the next couple months. Now, I believe that there are still some awards to be handed out, including SAG and WGA and things like that. And so we'll see. We'll see where the momentum continues to go. But this is definitely the big first step into the Oscar season push. But guys, those were the Golden Globe winners. Let me know in the comments what surprised you, what didn't surprise you, and at this point in time, who is your pick to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Let me know in the comments down below. All right, guys. So the Golden Globes, right? We're going to talk a lot this episode about the Golden Globes and their implications and whatnot. But something really interesting, something really historic happened at the Golden Globes, and that is that Colin Farrell, who, is a legendary, he's a great actor in his own right. I say in his own right. Just outside of, big blockbuster media. Because if you guys remember, he's been a part of the Fantastic Beasts franchise. And obviously he's now a part of the DC, not DCU, but DC Studios as the Penguin in the Batman universe. But he, he's been amazing in films like Banshees of Inisherin and all these other great Oscar films. But he has won, and this is amazing to me. And I wanted to really do this segment to, of course, talk about Penguin Season 2 and whatever that means, but just to really say, this is amazing. It's amazing because Colin Farrell has won the Golden Globe for Best Performance by an Actor in a Limited Series, Anthology, Series, or Motion Picture Made for Television. Which, by the way, just going back to that Agatha point really quick, if you guys haven't seen, if you're watching the individual segment, I did a segment about Agatha All Along, whether or not it means, season 2. And Agatha All Along was submitted into the comedy series, which people were like, oh, does that mean, season 2 automatically because they didn't submit Agatha for the limited series category? And to that point, I'm fairly sure, and in fact, I'm almost certain that even if you submit your show for the limited series category, you can still make a season 2. Case in point, Matt Reeves was talking about the fact that they are now seriously looking into Penguin Season 2. He reiterated that point very recently. We did a segment about this a couple weeks ago, but he reiterated that point very seriously. And he was like, yeah, no, we're now looking into how Penguin Season 2 can fit in with the Batman universe. So just because, Penguin was submitted for a limited series doesn't really mean anything in terms of Season 2. That being said, Colin Farrell has won this award. He won the Penguin, he won the Best Performance by an Actor in Limited Series as Penguin, as Oz Cobb. He won this category. And other nominees include Richard Gadd, And I don't know many of these actors, honestly. So if you guys do, let me know. And I haven't seen many of these shows either. So interesting here. But Richard Gadd, Kevin Kline, Cooper Koch, Ewan McGregor, and Andrew Scott. So, again, these are all fantastic actors in fantastic series, but Colin Farrell is the one who came out on top. It's amazing. So it really is, I had thought that the landmark moment for acting in superhero genre kind of television, or not even television, but film actually, was going to be Angela Bassett for Black Panther Wakanda Forever to this day. And again, I think, look, Jamie Lee Curtis, I think she's amazing, and her speech was awesome. The fact that she won an Oscar, and I, it wasn't, I'm one of those people this is a whole sidebar, but I'm one of those people who didn't love Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I thought she did a good job in Everything Everywhere All at Once, and everyone did, but I thought Angela Bassett's performance in Black Panther Wakanda Forever was next level, and so I thought that was going to be a landmark moment for acting in comic book properties. It turns out, though, this might be it. And I know that, look, we've had many Jokers, right? Many Jokers, Heath Ledger and Joaquin Phoenix. So 2 Jokers win, Academy Awards for Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor. But I think that, we're really starting to see now that these kinds of comic book genre properties are going to be taken much more seriously as long as, they're up to the standards, right? It's not enough to just make a Deadpool and Wolverine, which I love Deadpool and Wolverine, by the way, and just expect, Ryan Reynolds to be nominated for an Academy Award, right? Again, I love Deadpool and Wolverine, but if anyone thinks that Ryan Reynolds deserves to be nominated for Best Actor, I don't quite know. That's amazing, and I totally respect that, but I don't think in any world that would happen. So again, I just think that this is an awesome thing for Colin Farrell. It's an awesome thing for comic book properties in general. Now, does this increase the likelihood of a season 2 is the next question. And I think if there were any doubts that there was going to be a season 2, this all but dispels them. And again, this is all of the Matt Reeves comments aside, all of the Colin Farrell comments aside. Does this change anything in terms of season 2? I think that this actually probably increases the chances of it because, look, and I'm not saying that Joaquin Phoenix winning Best Actor was the only reason Joker 2 happened. In fact, there's something called $1 billion that happened, Joker 1 making $1 billion that really catapulted that into happening. But did it hurt? No, absolutely not. If you win, Academy Award and you get that kind of box office prestige as well, you're going to make a sequel, right? And in television, I think that if you win this kind of, Best Actor thing, then I think that Colin Farrell, who I think still has a lot to give with this character, I don't think he's nearly done in his run as Oscob. He said, putting on the makeup is exhausting. And yeah, it looks exhausting. I mean, he just disappears in it. But I'm sure at the prospects of trying to win another Golden Globe, because unlike movies, right? It's not like, I don't think has this ever happened where a movie, wins an actor an Academy Award and then the sequel, they win it again. In fact, I think, very rarely do we have actors acting in movies that do get sequels, but that win the Best Actor awards at the Oscars. But, for television, I think it's much more common, right? I think that you can win that award many, many, many times, win these awards many, many times. So I think that, if Colin Farrell is chasing prestige, and I don't know anything about Colin Farrell in general, but I think that the thought of, let's do it again, let's run it back, I think that has to be top of mind. So again, that's all me just speculating about it, but I think that it definitely doesn't hurt the chances of Penguin Season 2. So, do you think, guys, that Colin Farrell winning the Best Actor in a Limited Series role is increasing the chances of a Penguin Season 2, or do you think that it would have happened anyways? Because I think it is happening, regardless of whatever we think. So do you think it would have happened anyways? And what do you guys think of Colin Farrell winning in general? I think it's awesome, and I think it's a big step forward. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, so we have some Star Wars news to discuss here. We have a little bit of a confirmation. We have a big confirmation, I guess, as to a casting, but then also a more implicit confirmation about, a status of one of the upcoming Star Wars shows. So it has been confirmed. Well, not confirmed, but, like I've been saying, I again, talk about these sources all the time because I think it's important that we talk about the accuracy and validity of some of these sources. But if it's coming from the Hollywood Reporter, if it's coming from Deadline, if it's coming from Variety, then chances are it is very accurate. You can probably take it to the bank. So Hollywood Reporter, well, actually, I believe it was first reported by Jeff Snyder, who we've talked about before. He's been reporting a lot of stuff about Batman and about the Sony universe and whatnot, but he's generally very accurate, but I wouldn't put him at the same tier. So I was waiting for another one of these major sources to confirm it, and sure enough, they did. The Hollywood Reporter came out with an article saying that the character of Baylan Skoll, who, if you don't remember, was one of the villains of the Ahsoka series, although villains, he wasn't really working. I think he had ulterior motives compared to Morgan Elsbeth and Thrawn. And so he and his apprentice Shin, they were kind of just off, in the distance doing other things towards the end of the series. And quite literally just left it on a cliffhanger. They were just hanging out, and then they saw a statue of the Mortis gods, and that was about it for them. And very tragically, I want to say during the airing of the show, or if not shortly thereafter, the actor who was playing Baylan Skoll, the great Ray Stevenson, who has been, he's been part of the Thor franchise. He was Punisher. I thought he was fantastic as Baylan Skoll. And you can say what you will about the Ahsoka series. For me, it was disappointing. I think there were a lot of missed opportunities. There were a lot of kind of silly moments that just didn't need to be there. And the story Just didn't feel like it was, coalescing in a way that made it feel satisfying. But I really thought that, look, if you're going to do a season 2, which had never been confirmed, by the way, they never confirmed that they were doing a season 2, although all reports seem to indicate that was the direction that they were going in. But, it seems like now, with this confirmation by the Hollywood Reporter that the actor, Ray Stevenson, passed away, played Baylan Skoll, but his character was left very open-ended. So the thought was, are you going to recast him? And the Hollywood Reporter is saying that they have recast him, and the actor is an actor who played a role in Game of Thrones as the Hound, I believe, and his name is Rory McCann. And so Rory McCann, who, looks like he could definitely play the part of Baylan Skoll, given what Ray Stevenson did in the first season, is going to be, playing Baylan in season 2. So again, that's, I think it would have been a big point of excitement for me to see Ray Stevenson come back as Baylan Skoll in Ahsoka season 2 if he were still alive. And it's really a bummer, for many reasons, obviously. We lost a great actor, and he seemed like a great guy. Everyone had great things to say about him, upon his passing. But given the fact that Ahsoka seems to be continuing on, and that's the other more implicit confirmation, is that, you don't do this recasting if you're not moving ahead with the series. And so it looks like this is, I would say, the biggest piece of confirmation saying that season 2 is a go. I think the article says it's unclear when filming will start, but you have to imagine that, especially given the fact that Andor season 2 seems to be one of the last live action series that is in any kind of active production. Mandalorian season 4 got turned into the movie, it seems like, Mandalorian and Grogu, and it looks like Ahsoka season 2 might take up that mantle and be the next series in production. And I wouldn't be surprised, given the success of Skeleton Crew, and let's wait and see the viewership numbers, but I would assume that they're doing very well. We hope so, at least I hope so, that Skeleton Crew season 2 would be following up shortly thereafter, and maybe hopefully a couple other series. There's been rumors about a Knights of the Old Republic series or movie. Again, I can only hope, and obviously we have the other movies coming out, but I think that's the indication that Ahsoka season 2 should be the next live action series after Andor season 2, and that may not be happening for a while, but we'll see. Maybe they had some secret live action series in development that I'm just not thinking about. And Obi-Wan season 2, I don't know, they keep hinting at it, but we'll see. So guys, the news is here that Rory McCann is replacing Ray Stevenson as Baylan Skoll. They recast the role, and it looks like they really are moving full steam ahead with Ahsoka season 2. What do you think about this news? Are you excited for a potential Ahsoka season 2, and would you be excited for the return of Baylan Skoll? I certainly, for all the faults of the Ahsoka series, I certainly would be very excited to see the character of Baylan Skoll back and see what's going on. And hopefully they can improve up, on the kind of weird structure and loose-endedness of what happened in Ahsoka. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, let's talk. I can't believe it. I know I said this in the immediate reaction. I can't believe it. The second to last episode of one of the most pleasant surprises of the last many years in Star Wars and Marvel and DC and whatever, pop culture, blockbuster. One of the biggest, most pleasant surprises, Skeleton Crew. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion for episode number 7 of Skeleton Crew. Like I said, the second to last episode. So if you haven't seen the episode, then I would recommend saving this segment for later, coming back once you have, because we are going to be talking about the episode in full spoilery details. So again, full spoiler warning, here we go. I usually like to start out these spoiler discussions by giving context about how I felt about the whole season. But if you've been following along, and I'll just give any of you who are new to the channel, which, by the way, welcome, make sure to subscribe, welcome to the Access Blockbusters crew. Thanks so much for joining. Anyways, all that aside, for those of you who are new, I'll give you the TLDR. I've loved this show. Every single episode, I've liked, loved, enjoyed, had emotional moments, laughed, all the things that you'd want out of a Star Wars show, all the things that you'd want out of any show, Skeleton Crew has delivered. And again, there are a couple, minor nitpicks. For example, some of the episodes are ridiculously short. And I think that, I would have loved 40-minute long Skeleton Crew episodes. These don't have to be hour-long episodes, certainly not. It's just not, I don't think, the style of the show. 28 minutes is a bit short, don't you think? That's just me. Maybe that's just me personally. And I think, there are a couple episodes that, maybe feel a little close to fillerish, but it's really the characters. I said this maybe in the episode 5 spoiler discussion, where, at this point, it's because the characters are so strong that you can just watch them do anything. You're just excited. I'm excited every week to just spend time with these characters in this world. And episode 7, again, not to bury the lead, is my favorite episode of the season. It was just awesome. And we'll talk through some of the reasons why as I go through my notes here. But again, this show has just continued to surprise me, continue to amaze me, and I cannot wait for the finale. I am actively feeling that sadness, thinking about the fact that after next week there will be no more Skeleton Crew for the foreseeable future. Please, Disney Star Wars, you don't have to make season 2s of many other shows that you've done, because frankly they don't really warrant season 2s. And I'm not even talking about critically, I just mean the viewership numbers. But this show, I really hope the viewership numbers are robust enough, because if there's ever a time to make a season 2, I think it has to be here. So let's dive into episode 7 of Skeleton Crew. Before we even get into that though, or before we even get into the plot, one thing I was thinking about, I mentioned this in my immediate reaction as well, is, going into this episode, in a way, right? In a way, this episode to me, didn't have a lot riding on it because the rest of the season had been so good. But in another way, it had a lot riding on it because, and the reason I say this is because, if episode 7 was not good, and let's just say that episode 8 was not good, then I think overall my thoughts on the show would be really good show, very good show, really disappointing ending, right? Because I think, you have to say 2 out of the 8, if 2 out of the 8 episodes, especially the last 2 episodes of a show are not as good, then I think it's a lot harder to be like, well, it was just 1 or 2 episodes here and there. Like, it was the entire ending that kind of was ruined, right? But I said if episode 7 was up to par with the rest of the season, honestly, and I can say this now because I loved episode 7, honestly, it doesn't really matter how good or bad episode 8 is. I mean, sure, if episode 8 is just the worst piece of anything I've ever seen, worst TV episode, worst minutes of cinema I've ever seen, then yeah, I mean, it will diminish the show. But it's at that point now where it's like, this show has cemented itself. I love this show. Doesn't matter. I love this show. If episode 8 is good, and I have no reason to believe it's not going to be good, just based on the previous 7 episodes, I have no reason to believe that it's not going to be good. Fingers crossed, because Star Wars and Marvel have had problems with their finales, so we'll see. But I mean, if episode 7 is even remotely good, guys, it's not even close. This is the best Star Wars show that's ever been made. I stand by that. Maybe aside from Clone Wars, but Clone Wars is a little bit different for me because of nostalgia. But yeah, I'm so excited. So anyways, that was a thought that I had going into the episode. So we start out here with the parents, and I did not have the parents playing hot potato with a communications device on my bingo card, but there you go. They were getting stunned, and that was, in hindsight, it's a little bit frightening, but they kind of play it off as not jokey, but they're literally playing hot potato with a communications device. I guess on a side note, talking about those shorter run times for previous episodes, I do kind of wish that we got a little bit more from the parents in the show. I'm not saying I wanted a whole parent episode somewhere stuck in the middle, nothing like that, but just, here and there, maybe a little bit more of, okay, we got to figure out where our kids are, because it feels like we get maybe 5 minutes of them at the beginning of every episode, but it's not really, it doesn't really matter. So anyways, we go back to the kids, and they are heading back to Aden, and I love the scene where Wim is all of a sudden sad, because it's like the kid who comes back from summer camp. I've had that experience. I'm sure you've had that experience where you're like, I'm really going to miss everybody, and I'm going to miss the adventure, and I'm going to miss the fun, and now we have to head back to reality and responsibilities. And I just think that was such a small kind of gesture to have in, that kind of scene to have in this show, but really good to include. And then the pirates appear out of hyperspace around the barrier, which I thought that was at Aden. Turns out that's the barrier. It's really not at Aden. And I love, by the way, the Star Wars music / pirate music. It's, if you listen to it when the ship appears out of hyperspace, it's like the pirate version of a Star Wars song, and I love it. I love the music. I love the show. It's shot so well too. Even just a little scene, of that squid guy, that squid man, as Jod is like, go check it out for yourselves. Go figure it out. And the I forget the species name. I know that weren't they fighting with the Mon Calamari in Clone Wars? Anyways, I believe the species name started with an A, and you can totally correct me in the comments. But just the scenes where the ship is flying out of the hangar and flying towards Aden, it's shot so well. It's shot so incredibly well. And then the kids save Jod once again, and Jod for all the good he's done, because I'm still holding out this hope, not hope. I almost think it is hope in a way, but I feel like just based on media and cinema that I've, TV, movies, media that I've seen before, it feels very much like Jod will get a redemption moment at the end of this series. It just kind of feels like that's where it's leaning. But this episode, if any episode persuaded me otherwise, it was this episode, because Jod is just a terrible person, but the kids save him once again by jumping out of hyperspace and distracting the pirates for just a second. So their ship gets, the Onyx Cinder gets trapped in the tractor beam, and then they basically, what's his name, Brutus, the Wolfman captain, they capture him in a giant claw machine, and Jod just kills him, which, yeah, I mean, you kind of saw that coming, right? Because it's Jod, and Jod is just turning into a worse and worse person every single time. And we do wonder if he's going to have a change of heart. They also, I said this, I wrote this in my notes during this part of the show, and I mean, the lightsabers come out a little bit later as well, a couple times, but they have to explain his force powers at some point, right? So, I mentioned in my immediate reaction that, there are mysteries that they're setting up really well, that they're answering, and then they're leaving some to the finale that I think should be left to the finale. For example, the supervisor. I think the supervisor, 100%, 99%, we're going to know who the supervisor is by the time this show ends. And I think it's totally fine to leave that for the finale. But maybe Jod's backstory would have benefited a little bit more from, getting some extra screen time if the shows and the episodes had been a little bit longer. I don't think it would have made much of a difference, in terms of revelations and plot and things like that if we had gotten a little bit of Jod's backstory in the last episode or two. And so I'm a little, I'm wondering, are they just going to dump his entire backstory in the finale? I don't know. Seems a little odd to me, but we'll see. I mean, that's the one thing, I said in my immediate reaction. There's one mystery that I'm like, are you gonna reveal that next episode, or are you just gonna save that for what I hope is a potential season 2? Although I would like to know more about Jod, but I hope you get a season 2, so we'll see. Then we get a scene with the parents. They're sending in a hologram. I got emotional, guys. I didn't cry or anything, but I felt the tears start to well up. I got emotional when the mom said she loved the kids. I don't know, guys. It's small things, but when you get attached to characters like this, it's hard. It's hard to just see them as anything but people that you're like, real people, real characters, you're seeing. And I love it. I love the show. And then, like I said in earlier on, I laughed. I almost cried because talking about laughter, the line where I think Wim's dad is like, "Don't tell anyone where you're from," and Jod just mutters, "Oops." I thought that was funny. I thought that was really funny. But anyways, the next scene, so then basically they do the whole thing with Smee again, where they're trying to get control of him and who's in control of the ship, pirate rules and things like that. And I'm not going to lie, the whole unclaimsies thing that Fern did was silly. I mean, it was very silly, but, I think the show has earned that at this point, and so I totally didn't mind that. If, like I said before, different shows, based on their tones, based on how well it's written, based on their characters, can warrant different suspensions of disbelief. And this show, for me personally, has earned that. Again, in The Mandalorian, for example, if Mando's on that pirate ship, because remember, one of the pirates on the crew is one of the pirates that we see, I think, in Mandalorian Season 3. If that, Mandalorian gets on that pirate ship and then they have this whole, talk about pirate code, and then Mando's like, "Unclaimsies," and then whatever, I would have been like, "You're kidding." I would have been so annoyed by that. But it's Skeleton Crew. It's not Mandalorian. It's a little bit different, And so I think that is totally fine there. Then then the ship is now heading through the barrier, and we see these giant lightning tower things, which is really interesting, and I'm sure we'll figure out a little bit more about the barrier if we figure out more about the supervisor as well. But it's interesting. It's very interesting to see what the barrier actually looks like. And then Adden is actually just a tiny little planet on the inside. But then, surprise, Jod is back. And before you could say anything else, because I was typing, I was mid-sentence typing like, "Oh, Jod's back," and then Jod decapitates me. Now, my initial shock, right? I literally had, my jaw was on the floor. I was initially just so shocked. I was, and I literally said out loud, I was like, no, you didn't just decapitate Smee. And then, the rational side of the brain goes, but there's no way he's not back in the finale, right? It's a droid, first of all, and, they'll find a way to bring Smee back. But it doesn't really matter, because that scene in itself was shocking. And again, it just shows you how invested I am in these characters. I was like, no, Smee, because Smee is a character that I've really grown to like in this show. And Jod, again, if there was a redemption arc going on here, I don't know. Episode 7 seems to really put a dent in it, especially with the last shot of this episode, which we'll talk about in just a second. But he's on his real villain arc. He's villain monologuing as well. He's talking about carving up the parents, and I'm like, yeah, well, we'll see. I really thought you had a redemption arc in you, but I don't know anymore. I don't know. So then we get them landing on the ship, and we get to see the Mint, which, by the way, the CGI, the visual effects shots are just so good as well. Whoever was in charge of this, John Watts, and whoever was supervising the VFX, just so great, so great. It looks fantastic. And you can see, heading into the vault, it's a giant IKEA. For those of you who've been to IKEA, you guys kind of maybe know what I'm talking about. It's just a giant IKEA of money, and the look on Jod's face, Jude Law, fantastic. He's selling all of it, just the giddiness, the joy, the euphoria that he feels when he sees this much money. It's just, yeah. This is his dream. This is his dream. In between that, though, We get the reunion between the parents and the kids. And if the scene with the hologram was emotional, this was even more emotional. Again, didn't outright cry or anything. And I'm not afraid to say when I do cry. This year alone, I mean, Inside Out 2 and Shrinking alone. Anyways, that's off topic. But, I didn't cry in this scene, but I got very emotional because it's so touching to me. And I know if you guys are not invested in the show, it just comes off as very cheesy in one note, but that's totally fine. I mean, I loved it. I thought it was great. And then Jod comes out with the lightsaber, and that's the end of the episode. Guys, who knows what happens in episode 8? Episode 8 might even just start out with Jod being like, surprise, just kidding, I'm a Jedi and I protected your kids. Or he might actually try to attack the kids. It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility, given that he threatened Fern to one-to-one combat. So, I don't know. This show has, again, what I said about it in the immediate reaction, I will say it again here. While I don't think it's nearly as good as WandaVision, because WandaVision, to me, is on a level of its own, honestly, amongst so many shows. It is one of my favorite shows of all time. It's literally one of the best MCU things I think they've ever done. But in comparison, to make the comparison, rather, what I think this is like is that you have, how WandaVision is head and shoulders, to me, above the next best Disney Plus show, which I think is in the realm of a Loki season 2 or a Hawkeye, for example, even in the ballpark of Agatha All Along. But the way that WandaVision is head and shoulders above the next best show, to me, Skeleton Crew, again, finale could be terrible, and I still think this is head and shoulders above the next best thing that Star Wars has done on Disney Plus. It is so good, and I'm so glad that this came out at this time. It just feels like we need it. And with Andor season 2, we might have back-to-back amazing Star Wars TV shows to talk about. And so I am so excited about that. Guys, let me know in the comments down below what you thought about episode 7 of Skeleton Crew. And are you excited for episode 8? Are you a little bit sad like me? I'm a bit sad, I'm not gonna lie. And yeah, we'll see where this amazing show ends up. So guys, let me know in the comments what you thought about this episode. Alrighty guys, let's talk about the results of the Golden Globes 2025. So I'm going to be honest. I usually don't pay attention to the results of the Golden Globes too much. I'm more of an Oscars guy myself, but I think that now, especially with the channel and especially with doing the weekly podcasts, I think it's very interesting to at least pay attention to the results and see, what we might be able to glean from the results of the Golden Globes. And I'm looking at this in a way of saying, does this tell us anything about who might win the Oscars? Does this give us a lens into what the results of the Academy Awards might be? And I think there are some interesting insights in here that I think we can talk about. But, I want to go through some of the categories. In fact, I have an article pulled up here where I have, I believe, all the major categories and their winners. So we'll go through as many as I think is interesting to talk about here. We'll skim through some others. But again, I think that it's a very interesting exercise in thinking about, okay, do the results of the Golden Globe, can they forecast anything about the Oscars? Now, I was doing a little bit of research beforehand, and the interesting thing is that there is usually a decent bit of overlap between the Golden Globes, Best Picture winners, Best Actor winners, etc., and the Oscars. That being said, it's not even close to 100% match rate, right? I think that, I think one of the recent examples was Coda, for example. I don't think Coda won at the Golden Globes, which I think it ended up winning the Best Picture. That year I think was a little weird, a little strange. To be fair, I think that was the COVID year. But anyways, I think that, it's important to keep in mind that it doesn't always line up. So just because something some actress or actor won a category doesn't necessarily mean that they're a lock to win at the Oscars, if that makes sense. So we're going to go through this. And also in fairness, because I want to do a couple at least, Oscar preview segments and even maybe a couple Oscar preview episodes, right? Where I make my own predictions and put them out there for you guys to react to and hopefully get some of them right. But I think that, I still need to work my way through a lot of the Oscar nominated films, or at least the predicted Oscar nominated films, because I think that the results of the nominations are coming out next week. So we'll talk about them hopefully in next week's episode, I think, is when they will come out. But that being said, I still admittedly have to work my way through a lot of them. Let me just tell you right now, actually, as of the recording of this segment, which films I have seen, and then which films I am still, trying to see before the Oscar nominations come out. So just so that I can give you a more robust idea of, more robust predictions, more robust analysis. This is the first year where I'm really attempting before the Oscars come out to watch all of these films. usually I wait until after the Oscars are done to then sort of go back and see which films I want to watch after it's all finished. But this year, because of, just wanting to cover it more comprehensively, I wanted to go through them beforehand. So here's a list. I have a list here of Oscar films, and you can let me know if I've forgotten some of them, and which ones I should add to this list and which ones you think maybe aren't, part of this list. I'm looking at films that will likely, most importantly, be likely nominated for Best Picture, but also films that probably will win some acting categories as well, even if the films themselves are not nominated. So I have seen, and I'm just going in alphabetical order of this list. First up is Anora. I have seen Anora, and we'll talk more extensively about my thoughts about any of these films later on. The Brutalist I have not seen. A Complete Unknown I have not seen, though I am planning on seeing it hopefully soon. That's the Timothée Chalamet, Bob Dylan biopic. Conclave, as you guys probably know, based on my rankings of my top favorite films of 2024, I have seen Conclave. A Different Man, starring Sebastian Stan, I have not seen. Dune Part 2, obviously, I have seen. Emilia Perez, I am actually in the middle of watching. I've seen maybe a third of it so far on Netflix, and we'll talk about that again, at a later point. Gladiator 2, I put Gladiator 2 here because it popped up on a couple Oscar lists. Frankly, I would be a little surprised if it was nominated for Best Picture, but it's on some lists, so I have seen Gladiator 2. Nosferatu, again, popped up on a couple lists. I don't know if it'll be there. Maybe. It's in theaters right now. I don't have any interest, honestly, in seeing it in theaters. I might wait until it comes out. If it does come out before, on streaming or whatever, if it comes out before the Oscars actually happen, I don't know. We'll have to see about that. Frankly, I'm not a huge horror fan, so I don't have a huge desire to see horror films in theaters, but again, that's just me. A Real Pain I actually have seen, and that's the one with Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin, who Kieran Culkin was a winner at the Golden Globes yesterday. Sing Sing I have not seen, and The Substance I have not seen, and then Wicked I obviously have seen. Other websites have put out stuff like the Wild Robot as potential Oscar Best Picture nominations. I don't necessarily know. This list feels pretty comprehensive to me, but again, you can let me know if I've missed a couple of them just based on my research. So let's go through the winners of the Golden Globes and see what we can find. First of all, Best Picture or Best Performance by an actress in a supporting role in any motion picture. Zoe Saldana wins for Emilia Perez. Selena Gomez also nominated for Emilia Perez, and Ariana Grande was another notable actress who was nominated there for Wicked as Glinda. So that's interesting. Best Performance by an Actress in a Television Series, Musical, or Comedy. Jean Smart won for Hacks. I don't think there's, KATHRYN HAHN was nominated in that category. I guess that's something of note. Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role in any motion picture. That is Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain. So there you go. That's the one Kieran Culkin won. Interestingly, and I guess we'll bring this up now. Anora, right? Anora was a film that was sort of crowned by many as the Oscar favorite heading into this season. And so I was expecting going into yesterday, Anora is probably going to win a bunch of awards. Anora didn't win anything, I don't think. It didn't win any of the major ones at the very least. And so Yura Borisov was nominated for Anora and he didn't win. And Kieran Culkin was the one who got that one. So interesting there. And I think that's going to be a common theme that we see here is that, well, I thought Anora was going to do really well at the Golden Globes and then lead into an Oscar push. I'm not so sure about Anora now in the Oscar race, but we'll have to see about that. Best Performance by an Actor in a Television Series, Drama, that's Hiroyuki Sanada for Shogun. Shogun just won huge. Shogun won big time. Best Performance by an Actress in a Supporting Role in a Television Series, that is Jessica Gunning as in Baby Reindeer. Moving on quickly. The television ones I'm not as familiar with because I haven't seen a lot of these shows. So yeah, there's that. Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role in a Television Series. And this one goes to Tadanobu Asano for Shogun. But guys, Harrison Ford was nominated here for Shrinking. And I talked about this in the last episode, but guys, please watch Shrinking. Please watch Shrinking. This is the best that Harrison Ford has ever been, in my opinion. I'm baffled, honestly, that Shrinking Season 2 didn't get nominated more than this. I'm just really baffled, honestly. It's crazy to me. Anyways, all that being said. Best Performance by an Actor in a Television Series, Musical, or Comedy, Jeremy Allen White, our new Rhoda the Hutt, as we talked about before, for The Bear. That's not a big surprise, I don't think. Best Screenplay Motion Picture goes to Conclave, which is great. I think the Conclave script was great. It was awesome. Anora, again, getting shut out. Emilia Perez also getting shut out. Real Pain, pretty good script as well. Jesse Eisenberg getting shut out. And The Substance also, Substance and The Brutal. So these are, I feel like this category in general is a pretty good hint as to what the final Best Picture list is going to look like, plus a couple. Like here, right? It's Conclave, Emilia Perez, Honora, The Brutalist, A Real Pain, The Substance, and then I would add on Dune Part 2 and Wicked, and maybe a couple more like Sing Sing, for example. So I think this is a pretty good idea of what you're going to get here at the Oscars. Stand-up, I'm not really going to... Ali Wong won stand-up, but again, I'm not too familiar with any of these. Best Motion Picture non-English is Emilia Perez. It's that classic, if a film wins Best Picture and it's a foreign film, then obviously it's going to win the foreign film category. This is the one, Colin Farrell, Best Performance by an Actor in a Limited Series, Anthology, Series, or Motion Picture made for television. That is Colin Farrell as Oz Cobb, as Penguin. Amazing work, just fantastic. We talked about this ad nauseum on the channel, so... there is that. Best Performance by an Actress, same category. Jodie Foster, True Detective, Night Country. Really, that's good for her. I've heard a lot of great things about that series, and so really happy for her. Kristen Milioti also nominated here for The Penguin, and she didn't win. I think she did a fantastic job, but I've heard also rave things about Jodie Foster in True Detective, Night Country as well. Best Performance by an Actress in a Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy. This one was a big one. It was Demi Moore for The Substance, which is... great. That's awesome. I think, her speech was really moving, and the fact that this was her big, her big moment, and she really found her career revived, and people were calling her a popcorn actress before this, but she really came through here, which is awesome. Also, Cynthia Erivo nominated for Wicked here, but obviously did not win that one. Mikey Madison, Zendaya. Mikey Madison, again, everyone was like, Honora is going to win everything. Mikey Madison nominated here, did not win. And I think that is an interesting thing heading into the Oscars. Best Performance by an Actor in a Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy. Sebastian Stan for A Different Man. Again, haven't seen that film yet, but, excited to. Jesse Eisenberg also nominated here. Hugh Grant for Heretic. Very interesting. Very, very interesting there. And then, Best Motion Picture Animated goes to a movie called Flow, which honestly, I'm not even going to lie, I haven't heard of this movie before. Inside Out 2, Moana 2, Wild Robot, Wallace and Gromit, interestingly, and Memoir of a Snail. All films I have heard of, and most 3 of them I have seen. But Flow? Never heard of it before. So interesting, because I had assumed it was going to be a race between Wild Robot and Inside Out 2. And personally, I think Inside Out 2 is better. That's just my opinion. But I think that everyone was kind of thinking Wild Robot was going to take it. But Flow, very interesting that another film has won that award. Best Director Motion Picture is the director Brady Corbett for The Brutalist, and again, same kind of deal, right? The Brutalist, Emilia Perez, Honora, Conclave, The Substance, and another film, All We Imagine as Light, is nominated here, the director of that. But again, I don't imagine that that's going to be nominated for Best Picture for the Academy Awards. We'll see. Best Original Score actually went to Challengers, and again, same kind of films, same kinds of films here. Conclave, Brutalist, Wild Robot, Emilia Perez, Dune Part 2. Hans Zimmer, by the way, getting his due for that one. Best Original Song came from Emilia Perez. For those of you who don't know, Emilia Perez is kind of a musical as well. So, there is that. And then, let's moving on here. This category, I didn't even know it existed. Cinematic and Box Office Achievement. I mean, great. I'm happy Wicked won. But, Wicked winning cinematic and box office achievement at the Golden Globes and winning nothing else feels lame. This category just feels lame. Wicked, Alien, Romulus, Beetlejuice, Deadpool and Wolverine, Gladiator 2, Inside Out 2, Twisters, The Wild Robot. It just feels like, hey guys, we know that you want to see your big films up here. You wanted to see Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman maybe accept an award, so here you go. And it's like, okay, all right, calm down. So I think that's a little bit odd. I don't love this category having being there, and Wicked that's the only win that Wicked wins. Sure, Wicked is technically a Golden Globe winning film, but it won the Cinematic and Box Office Achievement Award. I think that's kind of silly. But anyways, Best Television Limited Series Anthology or Motion Picture Made for Television is Baby Reindeer, beating out The Penguin, by the way. Best Television Series Comedy or Musical is Hacks. And again, I haven't seen any of these new seasons of television. Hacks, Abbott Elementary, The Bear, The Gentleman, Nobody Wants This, Only Murders in the Building. But guys, shrinking. We're shrinking. Anyways, that's just my own personal vendetta, because I'm sure if I see all of these seasons of television, I'm going to be like, oh, they're all amazing and they all deserve it. But Shrinking is literally one of the best shows I've ever seen. So kind of baffled about that, but whatever. Best Performance by an Actress in a Television Series. It goes to Shogun. No surprise there. The actress's name is Anna Sawai. So she wins for Shogun. And then we move on to Best Television Series Drama. Shogun wins. No big surprise there. Squid Game also nominated, actually, which is kind of interesting because it just released a couple weeks ago. So I don't know what the deadlines are, but it has to be season 2. It can't be season 1. So very interesting there. Best Performance by an Actress in a Motion Picture Drama. That is for what am I going to mispronounce this? Fernanda Torres for I'm Still Here. Again, not a lot of familiarity here with people in this category. Best performance by an actor in a motion picture drama. Adrian Brody, The Brutalist, another a big win for The Brutalist, which I think it's an interesting sign heading into the Oscar season. Best motion picture drama. Speaking of The Brutalist beats out A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Nickel Boys, and September 5. September 5 is another film that I think we might be looking out for in terms of filling out those 10 spots for the Oscars, but we'll see about that. But The Brutalist winning Best Motion Picture Drama is very interesting here. And in the category that Anora is in, Best Motion Picture Musical or Comedy is Emilia Perez instead of Anora. So I think that's it. That is it. And it beats out Wicked as well, which I don't think Wicked has a shot to win Best Picture, even if it's nominated, which I think it will be nominated. But again, I think here are a couple takeaways here. And I know I went through that really fast. But I think that here are a couple takeaways that I have from all of that. Number one, like I've been saying throughout this segment, Anora was crowned the presumptive Oscar frontrunner, and it won nothing. And again, I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. I will talk more extensively about my thoughts about Anora and all the other films, Emilia Perez, Real Pain, hopefully watch The Substance, The Brutal, like all these films. I'll talk more extensively about my thoughts on them as we do an Oscar preview in probably a month or so. But, in general, it was interesting to hear all the narratives going into it, and then suddenly the narrative shifts. Now, again, like I said before, they don't always line up 1-to-1, right? Just because Anora doesn't win here doesn't mean that Anora is not going to win at the Oscars. But I think it's more about trends, honestly. And, by winning nothing, because again, if Anora won everything except for maybe Best Actress or something like that, you could make an argument like, oh, but the momentum is on its side. But I think by winning nothing, it kind of is interesting because it flips my perceptions now about who might be the favorites. And I think there are two clear quote unquote winners. I mean, other than objectively winning Golden Globes, but, winners in terms of momentum heading into the Oscar season. And those two films are The Brutalist and Emilia Perez. Now, I haven't seen The Brutalist all the way. I have seen some of Emilia Perez. But, in terms of why those two films have the appeal that they do compared to other films like Anora or A Real Pain or The Substance or whatnot, I don't know. Remains to be seen. But I think that we can probably take that as a lesson to say, I think those two films suddenly gained a lot of momentum heading into the next couple months. Now, I believe that there are still some awards to be handed out, including SAG and WGA and things like that. And so we'll see. We'll see where the momentum continues to go. But this is definitely the big first step into the Oscar season push. But guys, those were the Golden Globe winners. Let me know in the comments what surprised you, what didn't surprise you, and at this point in time, who is your pick to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, for the last time, for a little bit, let's talk about Creature Commandos. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion for the final episode in the series, episode 7. I believe it was called The Very Funny Monster. This is going to be a spoiler discussion. So if you have not seen episode 7 of Creature Commandos, and we are also going to be discussing the series as a whole towards the end of the segment. So this is your full spoiler warning before we get on to the spoiler discussion. And without further ado, let's get into it. So guys, I think it's more important, I like to do these recaps of just how I've been feeling about the show before most of my spoiler discussions, but I think it's most important here just to kind of give a recap of where we're coming from. So, I started the show with some anticipation because James Gunn is a very talented writer and he is very good at what he does, and what he's been doing in the comic book, movie, and TV space has been the same. It's been, let's take a ragtag group of heroes that you don't think you're going to care about, try to make you fall in love with them, and then by the end of the show, you're like, oh, I totally get these characters. I'm on board with them. Let's go on more adventures with them and see what's happening. So that's been James Gunn's MO. Guardians of the Galaxy 1, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, then he did The Suicide Squad, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, The Suicide Squad, then Peacemaker Season 1, and now then Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, now Creature Commandos. He's taking a little bit of a break from that to do Superman, and then wouldn't you know it, he's going right back to that exact same thing with Peacemaker Season 2. So I was a little nervous going into this series because I thought, is this just going to be the same old kind of thing? But, I thought, look, James Gunn is really good. And for the record, I say this as if I'm sick and tired of it, but I've really liked all 5 of the previous properties. All 3 Guardians films I like, pretty much. I think they're really solid. I really like The Suicide Squad, and I really like Peacemaker. So I was like, okay, you know what? If Gunn can just deliver and do the things he does well, then maybe this will just be an entertaining show and maybe something more. And so I went into the show. First 2 episodes, I thought, nah, it's fine. It's okay. It's just kind of the same thing. Episode 3, it's fine. It's kind of the same thing. Then episode 4 came around and I was stunned. I thought, oh, this is what we were waiting for. Like, this is James Gunn saying, you thought you knew me, but I have some tricks up my sleeve to really get you invested in these characters that were kind of boring, in the first 3 episodes. And then episodes 5 and 6 happened and I was like, oh, we're right back. So episode 7 comes around and I'm sitting here going, please just stick the landing or surprise me or I don't know, just try to maybe do something that's a little bit different from what you've been doing. And right off the bat, I'll say this before we dive into the full spoiler discussion here. Episode 7 is exactly the same as most of the show. I am really disappointed with the show, not in terms of its quality. I think the show is fine, honestly. In a thumbs up, thumbs down spectrum, I would say thumbs up, thumbs very middle, but maybe slightly tilting up, maybe. I don't know. It's a well-written show. It's fine. It's got all the same things that James Gunn has, and maybe I'm just tired of it. Who knows? Maybe with Peacemaker Season 2, I'll be more on board just because it's a continuation of Season 1, which I liked, and I like John Cena, and I think also with longer form television, you have more time to develop the characters and get to know them a little bit more. This series, with each episode just being 22 minutes, felt so short and really rushed, and that makes episode 4 all the more amazing. Episode 4 is incredible, in my opinion, of Creature Commandos, but the rest of the series, I'm kind of over it, I'm kind of over it. So I watched this episode and I was like, it's the same. It's just the same. And so, not to say that I think the first project of the DCU is an abject failure. Not at all. Not at all. I don't think so. It wasn't for me. I just don't think it was for me. Because I know a lot of people really love the show. And for me, I just wasn't for me. So we'll talk about some of my more detailed thoughts as we go through the episode here. But just wanted to give that sort of summary up front. So, here we go. Entering episode 7. It is, the last character we haven't gotten any real backstory into, other than maybe Rick Flag Sr., but I guess he's not really a big character in this show. He really didn't become a big character after episode 5, I think, and then he was just out. So it's a Nina Mazursky episode. It's kind of hard to follow my notes sometimes because, especially with these kinds of shows, you're going back and forth between the past and the present. So, just trying to work through those parallel time streams and whatnot. But it's funny because there was a scene where the bride refers to Phosphorus as Ghost Rider. I just thought that was kind of funny. And then we have Frankenstein, and Frankenstein is chasing after the bride, and you feel bad for him, but then you don't really because he's not a good person. He's a pretty crazy bad person. So it's weird because a lot of these characters you almost want to feel bad for them sometimes, and then you're like, but you're also just doing terrible things. So it's kind of a weird dynamic there. So then we dive into the real backstory of Nina Mazursky and how her father really tried to care for her. I guess she had some lung problems, and then he turned her into a fish, as one does. The mom in this flashback is quite harsh, honestly. You get it. You totally get that this is a very hard thing to see the family go through. But that mom, maybe it was just the fact, again, when you condense these episodes so much, the backstory becomes so, just it feels so rushed, and so maybe that if we got to see this play out over a little bit of a longer period of time, it would have felt a little more earned. But the mom's just like, I'm done, I'm leaving, and I was like, whoa, okay. I mean, that's interesting here. And what's interesting too, as I was watching, so because then we cut back to the present day, right? Because we have, so the first flashback is basically Nina's birth, and then kind of figuring out how she's going to survive, and the mom leaves, and then they figure out, okay, we're going to turn her into a fish, and she's going to breathe underwater. And then we head back to present day, and basically the princess is swimming for some reason, and the Creature Commandos are like, okay, we got to go kill her. And what's interesting about this show is that honestly, even Weasel, right? They've given us the backstory in very condensed form for every single character in this show, and I don't feel any differently about any of them than I did at the beginning of the show. And that to me feels like what the crux of the quote unquote failure. And again, I don't think the show's a failure. For me, why I didn't enjoy the show as much is because I'm watching these characters and I'm like, at this point, having seen, the tragic backstories of the bride and of Weasel and of Dr. Phosphorus and of Nina Mazursky, I don't feel any differently than I did in episode 1. Because in episode 1, they have the same characteristics. Bride is bride, Phosphorus is sadistic Phosphorus. Weasel is just dog-like crazy Weasel. And Nina was just nice Nina in the beginning. And so I think that really, it boils down to that for me, is that you showed us the backstories for these characters. That's great. That's fantastic. But I I don't feel any tangible difference. You know, I feel like the characters, yes, you objectively understand what they had gone through, but it didn't really reach me. You know, it really didn't hit me in the way that where I was like, oh, okay, got it. And so now I feel this, you know, great attachment and sympathy to these characters. And of course, you know, James Gunn has said in interviews, the goal was not really to make you sympathetic to these characters. He said what this series was like Guardians of the Galaxy without the sentimentality. And yeah, I mean, you can totally see that. And maybe that just doesn't work for me, you know, and that's totally fine. We get some more flashbacks to Nina Mazursky now. She's at school. I don't get, why are all the bullies in these shows, you know, comic book movies and shows, such like the most exaggerated, worst versions of school bullies? It's like only the TV versions of, or the movie versions of school bullies. You know, I'm thinking about Spider-Man 1 or Shazam, you know, for some reason when they're bullying Freddie Freeman. It's like, why are they just such cartoonish characters? I don't understand that. But anyways, am I calling her a frog and whatnot? Like, the show wants to take itself seriously at some points, and it just wants to take itself so unseriously at certain points. And then I think it wants to take itself seriously, but it becomes unserious, and I feel like the balance just wasn't quite there. And yeah, I mean, sure, if the backstory is trying to make Nina Mazursky more sympathetic so that when she ultimately, you know, kind of makes the turn and tries to go kill the princess, that you feel bad and you don't want her to do that. I mean, sure, that's there for me. But I feel like, it has nothing really to do with the backstory. You can't help but like Nina because she's literally the only character, and they call that out here. The bride calls that out at the very end when she's talking to the princess. She's the only character who has any ounce of kindness in the show. So of course you feel bad for her, and of course, you know, you tend to like her because there's no one else to like in the show. And I think that's, I don't know, was that a miscalculation on James Gunn's part? I don't think so. I think he very much intended for that to be the case. I just, again, don't think it landed for me. So anyways, the backstory, you know, the backstory is really sad with her dad dying in front of her. I didn't feel it as much as I did with the Weasel one, but yeah, it is sad. Then, you know, she goes after the princess, and, you know, Weasel tries to save the princess, and, you know, Weasel can't swim. Callback, right? Callback to Suicide Squad. And basically saves the princess's life, who murders Nina. And at that point, you know, because the whole deal is like, Waller's like, we made a mistake. And you're kind of like, no, but the princess is bad somehow. We also never pick up with Cersei again. So, yeah, I don't know what happened to her. There are a lot of things that just feel so rushed about it. Even the ending just felt super rushed. Like, okay, Creature Commandos 2, I guess. You know, it just, again, really rushed. Really, really rushed. So the princess, you know, murders Nina, and there's more. All right, there's more because, you know, Waller, again, says made a mistake. And then we have this whole scene where the bride's explaining the whole thing. And I guess it was all set up because, and I listened to the explanation, and I was like, this feels way too convoluted for a series called Creature Commandos. The way that it had played out. But I guess basically she was in league with Clayface, or she got Clayface to help her because, you know, she was evil the whole time. And I guess Cersei's vision was true. Like, the princess would have, you know, caused World War III or whatever. So that was true. But then she wanted to get them off the scent, so she basically tried to frame it so that, you know, oh, the doctor's crazy, like, she's Clayface and whatnot. And I guess, you know, that was the plan. And then the bride kills her because apparently Nina is her friend. And I don't know. I never felt that throughout the entire series. You guys will have to let me know in the comments. I never once felt that the bride and Nina were friends. I felt like maybe she started to tolerate her towards the end. And that's the show. I mean, the bride and Phosphorus and Weasel just walk off. And then, you know, there's a little bit of a sting at the end where they, you know, Economos takes her into this room, and it's Creature Commandos. It's the new team. King Shark is back, I guess. I wonder if he's going to be voiced by Sylvester Stallone. It didn't sound like it in the scene. I don't know. I'll have to look it up later. But it's the new Creature Commandos. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, how it was renewed for season 2, and there you go, Creature Commandos season 2. So guys, look, as you can tell, I'm a bit over it. I think that there are a couple of things contributing to this. Number one, I don't know if this is the best format for James Gunn's quote-unquote formula. And I know it's not a formula, it's just what he likes to do, right? Take the ragtag group of heroes and turn them into sympathetic characters. I think what I mean by format is the formulation of it all, making these characters completely unsympathetic, basically. I don't think that helped, really, because then I just, what do I have to get attached to? Even in the Suicide Squad, Ratcatcher 2, even Bloodsport at the end, you know, Polka Dot Man, King Shark. It's like, I can get on board with these characters a little bit. This show really couldn't at all. So there's that. The other thing, though, by format, and what I mean by that, is that this show And I'm not talking about animation at all. You could totally have done any of this in animation. It would have been totally fine. I'm talking more about the fact that these are 22-minute episodes, and it feels like the Spark Notes version of every single character is what we got. And because we got the Spark Notes version of every single character, and because, again, they're not super sympathetic characters, I just never got attached to them. So even though we had seen the backstory explicitly for every single character, I just never felt like I got on board. So again, first project of the DCU, the real first project is going to be Superman, of course. So I'm not going to say that, like, even if this show, because this show is pretty critically well received, right? So it's not, everything's going fine. Like, it's all good. And if you guys love the show, totally fine. I totally respect that and would love to have some respectful dialogue with you guys in the comments. Because again, it's just all how it hits us, in different ways. But, even if the show was terrible, and I don't think it's terrible at all, I'm very thumbs middle, think it's totally fine, then it wouldn't have really changed my anticipation for Superman at all, because I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty convinced at least, that James Gunn is toning down some of those tendencies for Superman. Now, how much he tones down his tendencies, because again, you cannot deny his track record. All good projects so far, at least critically well-received projects, but we have now 6 examples of the same kind of tendencies in 6 different projects. Guardians 1, Guardians 2, The Suicide Squad, Peacemaker Season 1, Guardians 3, and now Creature Commandos. And he was writing then Peacemaker Season 2. So it's like 6 out of 7 projects with a little break in the middle with Superman. And I have no doubt he's going to do something a little bit different with Superman, because it's just not the same. But I don't know. I really don't know. So guys, those are my thoughts on Creature Commandos. Again, it doesn't make me any less excited for Superman. It's going to happen, and we'll have to see how that goes. Let me know what you thought about Creature Commandos and whether or not, you're looking forward to the next chapter of the DCU. I can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. So we have, I'm not going to say news, because I think this is still a report. It's a report. It's a rumor. I don't know what you want to call it, but we have something to talk about here regarding T'Challa and regarding Black Panther. Now, before we get into it, because, you've read the segment title, you know what we're going to talk about here. It's the report by Jeff Snyder that T'Challa is going to be recast in the upcoming Avengers movies. Or he didn't say Avengers movies, but that's what I'm presuming, because, they're about to end the Multiverse saga, and we'll read the quote in just a little bit, but he says that they're going to try to recast him, or they're planning on it, with the, quote, magic of the multiverse. So I would assume in the next Avengers movies. But anyways, I have to preface all of this by saying that, there is, in the movie news, television news kind of space, there is a ranking. There's sort of a tier list of different sources that you can trust, right? I think the ones that are at the very top, you have your Hollywood Reporters, Deadline, Variety. You can consider the Wrap maybe up there as well, although I usually don't read the Wrap, and Comic Book News, I think sometimes. There are other sources that are up there, but the 3 that I really focus on, and if they say it, then I'm taking it to the bank pretty much: Hollywood Reporter, Variety, and Deadline. Now, there are other sources that are a tier or two below that, where they're, when they say something, you take notice and you at least talk about the possibility of, okay, but this seems like it could be true based on the fact that this person's sources are generally accurate, although not always. So what do we think about it? Jeff Snyder is one of those people. And if there are people out there who are like, why don't you did you see the news that, Doctor Doom is actually a squid in Avengers Secret Wars? And then I go to the source and it's from a scooper. Again, I don't have anything personally against scoopers, but they are just wrong too many times. Most of them, not all of them, but even the ones that are more right than others are still wrong enough of the time that it's not enough for me to be like, yeah, I'm not going to just run with every single thing a scooper says, because it's just not really worth the time. So, and again, I want to give the coverage, I want to present the coverage in as honest of a way and as reliable of a way as possible. So all that to say is that Jeff Snyder is the one who's saying this. And so, I'm not going to take it to the bank like I would if, the Hollywood Reporter is reporting this, but I'm going to take this more seriously than if just a random blog post, or a scooper says this. So Jeff Snyder was giving some quotes out here, and he had this to say about T'Challa, and there are 2 quotes here. One is, well, they're both equally as interesting for different reasons. So this is the first quote, and then we'll read the second one, and then we'll talk about it. So the first quote, with Marvel reshuffling the deck in advance of Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars, and Robert Downey Jr. coming back, not as Iron Man, but as Doctor Doom, I'm told that the door is firmly open for T'Challa to be recast via the magic of the multiverse, end quote, okay? Just let that sink in, and then we'll move on to the second quote here. Quote, I heard that an actor was actually offered the role this past fall, a couple months after Downey's big reveal at Comic-Con, but they turned it down, not wanting to jeopardize their career momentum by stepping into Boseman's gigantic shoes, which may be too big to fill even for Hollywood's most talented black actors. Okay, those two quotes, both individually, have a whole lot to say. So let's kind of dive into each one as we usually do here. Just kind of take things one at a time. So the first quote here, with Marvel Studios reshuffling the decks ahead of Doomsday and Secret Wars, I think what that implies, I don't think that's news per se. I think it's more just the fact that, they were going to do Kang Dynasty, they were going to do all these multiverse things, and they're still going to do multiverse things, but they were going to do Kang Dynasty, and then they were going to maybe split the Avengers, all that kind of stuff. And then they decided, you know what, let's try to solidify, let's try to consolidate, let's end this multiverse saga, and let's bring in Doctor Doom, let's bring in Robert Downey Jr., let's go, let's finish out this multiverse saga. I think that's really what's happening here. So he says Robert Downey Jr. coming back, not as Iron Man, but as Doctor Doom. Okay, great. And then he kind of adds, it's almost like a non sequitur here, I guess, although it's the implication is that there's some causality between, maybe Marvel had no plans to recast T'Challa before Doctor Doom was coming to the picture. Why those two things are related, I'm not entirely sure, because they could have done the exact same thing if it's just, if the only reason is multiverse. They could have done that with Kang Dynasty. So it's interesting that Jeff Snyder is mentioning both in the same quote here. But anyways, he says, the door is firmly open for T'Challa to be recast via the magic of the multiverse. Okay, so let me take you back here a little bit, because it was tragically, right? It was 2020. I think it was October 2020 when T'Challa actor Chadwick Boseman, was it October, August? Maybe it was August 2020. T'Challa actor Chadwick Boseman tragically passed away. Again, it was a shock. It was a shock to myself. It was a shock to everyone around me. As we were reading the news, it was a shock to everyone. He was such a light. He was such a brilliant actor, and gone so soon. And again, that's not news to anybody, but it was shocking. So again, Marvel went through their process, and also there was COVID, so they weren't really releasing anything. We knew that Black Panther 2 was kind of in the works, but we didn't really know much about it. And then I think it was, I want to say early 2021, they did that whole Investors Day call, and they were like, yeah, Black Panther 2 is happening. We are not recasting T'Challa. Now, at the time, I said this. I had this to say about this. And there are videos on the channel. I talked about this. I thought the right move was to recast T'Challa. Because, and frankly, one of the big reasons why was because I had just seen a year ago The Rise of Skywalker. And look, I love Carrie Fisher, and I have no doubt that J.J. Abrams loved Carrie Fisher, and he thought what he was doing, the decisions that were being made, were in her best interest. So for all you people who are out there who are saying, oh, Ryan Coogler and, by J.J. Abrams, by not recasting, they're dishonoring their legacy. No, I mean, you may think that it's the wrong choice, and that is totally fine if you do. But I don't think we should ever question the fact that J.J. Abrams had nothing but love for Carrie Fisher and thought what he was doing was best, and Ryan Coogler the same for T'Challa with Black Panther Wakanda Forever. So there was a whole discussion. I said at the time, look, in a vacuum, at this moment, I would recast T'Challa. I think that it would help honor the legacy to bring the character forward and all that kind of stuff. But I said, you know what? I trust Ryan Coogler. I trust Kevin Feige. They knew Chadwick Boseman more than I ever will. They loved Chadwick Boseman more than I ever would. I trust that what they're going to do is, whether or not it works, because same with Leia. I don't think it worked. I don't think the reused footage worked. But I understand where they were coming from. I think that I thought the same about Ryan Coogler with Black Panther and T'Challa. So we waited. And then we got the first trailer for Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which I maintain. The first trailer for Black Panther Wakanda Forever is the single best MCU trailer ever released. It was emotional. It was a gut punch. And all of a sudden, I thought, oh, okay, let's see what happens. Second trailer came out and was also really good. And all of a sudden, I started to realize this might actually work for me, again, because I understand that for other people, it didn't work as well. That's totally fine. And so I went into Black Panther Wakanda Forever saying, okay, Ryan Coogler, let's see what you got. And the film has gotten better and better every single time I've seen it. And that's just me personally. I understand if you guys don't like it, that's totally fine. But for me, it's gotten better and better every single time. And the way I describe Black Panther Wakanda Forever is that it is the right film for the right time. I didn't know how much I needed to see that film to go through a similar quote-unquote grieving process, because again, it's naive. It's a little bit asinine to say that I know Chadwick Boseman and I loved him, but his loss did hurt me as well as it hurt many other people, right? And I didn't realize I needed to see that movie to grieve with the characters and feel that healing journey that Shuri eventually goes through. That last scene where she's just kind of staring off into the sunset is powerful. And she sees the silent images of T'Challa. I didn't know I needed that. And so, look, Black Panther being recast and not recast all aside, and is Shuri the right person to be Black Panther, et cetera, right character to be Black Panther? That movie, to me, was the right movie at the right time. And now I've done a rewatch of Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and you can go back and watch it. And I say it's not a perfect movie. There are things in it, just as a movie, structurally, that I think are missing. Like, I think there's a big chunk of the third act that's kind of missing. But, again, just what the movie was, I think it was the right movie at the right time. Now, that being said, and this is not what people want to hear, because people want to hear yes or no. They want to hear black and white. They want to hear absolutes. I feel like what I'm about to say complicates that picture a little bit, because I'm not opposed to now them recasting T'Challa. Not because I hate Shuri as Black Panther. I would also be totally fine with Shuri continuing to be Black Panther in a vacuum. Again, if, let's just say Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman was still alive and he was playing T'Challa, and it was the sort of situation of, Steve Rogers handing off the shield to the next Captain America. Would I have picked Shuri out of everyone? No. I would have picked Nakia first. I would have probably picked M'Baku first, just because Shuri is the tech genius. She's the tech whiz. And I wouldn't necessarily have picked her first. And I know there's comic precedents and all that kind of stuff, but Okoye I would have picked over Shuri. But anyways, am I saying this because I disliked Shuri as the Black Panther? No, not at all. But, I step back and look at that film and I say that was the right movie for the right time. If they do decide to recast T'Challa now, then I think that there is a way in which Ryan Coogler can make that Black Panther 3 movie the right movie for the right time. A different kind of movie for the right time. I don't know what it's going to be, right? I think, there's always a chance that they make the decision to recast and it's terrible. And it is what it is. It ended up being, a bad decision. But I think that I'm of the mind that Black Panther Wakanda Forever is a beautiful film, right? It was right there when we needed it. And I also think that there is also room for Ryan Coogler to say that was for that time, and now let's move on and let's honor Chadwick Boseman in a different way now that we've had some more time. That's totally fine. I'm open to whatever decisions that he wants to make because I trust him as a filmmaker, and I trust he loved Chadwick Boseman. He loved Chadwick Boseman. So I think that's my take on recasting T'Challa. Now, the second quote is interesting because the second quote is him saying somebody was offered, the role of T'Challa shortly after Robert Downey Jr. was announced, and they said no. And the reasoning seems to be because it's too big of shoes to fill. And I get that. What if there's a situation? I doubt it, right? But what if there's a situation where you go through all these screen tests and you offer all these actors parts, and they all just say I can't do that. Chadwick Boseman is too big. I doubt that just because. I mean, again, even though it's not like you can cast any male actor. First of all, you cast a black male actor, right? So, but I mean, there are so many talented, amazing black actors out there. It's just that, so I don't doubt that there would be somebody who would say, yes, I'm willing to take on the challenge of filling T'Challa's legacy. But, I wonder how many of those people would be Marvel's first choice. So there's a lot of complicating factors out there. Do I think at the end of the day, if Marvel decided we want to recast T'Challa, that they couldn't find a very, very talented, black actor, whether or not it's somebody we know, like John David Washington was a pretty popular fan casting for a while, whether or not it was someone like that or just someone completely unknown, do I doubt that they could find somebody? No. They're absolutely capable of finding someone. I think it's interesting that the shadow is, at least by one very prominent actor, because it seems like this quote indicates they had career momentum, so it seems like they're on a roll. At least one prominent actor says, I can't do it because of Chadwick Boseman and his legacy. So we'll see. We'll see about that. But yeah, I mean, I think, is it likely now at this point that T'Challa would be recast? I would say, yeah, I'd give it, something like a 60 to 70% chance, because I think this report seems valid. And I think that Jeff Snyder, again, is usually reliable. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this happening. And again, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Shuri as Black Panther, right thing, right time, in my opinion. But this could also be the right thing at the right time, Black Panther 3. So we'll see. We'll have to see about that. What do you guys think? I know this is sort of a touchy subject. It's always been a touchy subject because, again, we all love Chadwick Boseman. We all love his portrayal as T'Challa in Black Panther. And so we'll see. I think all we can hope for, this is what I've always said, all we can hope for is that, they do their best. They do their best to honor his legacy and whatever that entails. Let me know in the comments down below. And that will do it for episode number 60 of the Access Blockbusters pod. Thank you, as always. I genuinely, sincerely mean this, for joining me again this week. It's always just such a privilege to be able to talk to you guys in the comments and hear what you have to say. And it's a joy. So again, we're on a lot of different platforms now: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, hopefully more in the future. And looking forward to, a little bit of a slower January in terms of movies, but hopefully not news and trailers and shows and things like that. So really exciting stuff coming up, guys. Thank you so much for listening, as always, and I will see you guys in the next one.